Chapter 1641. The other members of Shrek's 7 monsters also had tears swimming in their eyes. Ever since the Shrek City bombing, they had become akin to orphan children, and everything they had done since then was for the joint goal of rebuilding their home. In order to fulfill this wish as quickly as possible, they had been working tirelessly, and now that Shrek Academy had finally re-established itself, they were all overcome with emotion. After a long while, Tang Wuling finally managed to collect himself before turning back around. Thank you, Elder Long, and thank you to everyone else as well. This rebuild is a product of our concerted efforts, and I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to bettering the Academy and protecting its title as the #1 academy on the continent. Through our neutral Shrek Academy, I want to put an end to all wars and spread peace to all of the continents. Long Ye chimed in. Well said. This is the core purpose behind the existence of Shrek Academy. The Academy has been striving toward this dream for over 20,000 years. Technological advancements are constantly destroying the continent's natural environment, resulting in resource shortages and the weakening of the ancient golden tree. We need to do everything in our power to change all of this so that the Douluo continent can flourish again. In order to accomplish this, we have to be sufficiently powerful ourselves so we can actually make a substantial change. The destruction of the ancient golden tree was a terrifying disaster for the entire continent, but very few people were aware of this. The environment on the Douluo continent is becoming less and less hospitable, and if humans continue to take from the continent without exercising restraint, the destruction of the continent will be the ultimate outcome. Tang Wuling nodded in agreement upon hearing this. He had already devised a plan. Once Shrek Academy truly re-established itself, his main priority was going to be to revitalize the Tree of Life so that it could better the continent's environment as much as possible. The ecosystem on a continent directly contributes to the level of life energy on that continent, so if the ecosystem were constantly being destroyed, the continent would inevitably be headed toward destruction. All of the damage that humans had inflicted upon the planet would be reciprocated upon the human race by the entire plane in the form of disasters. As the son of nature and the one who was blessed by the plane, Tang Wuling was well aware of this through his understanding of planar laws. As such, he had to dedicate all of his efforts to change as much of this as possible. Shrek Academy was steadily becoming more and more powerful, and once it established a solid foundation, it had to return to the political sphere. Shrek Academy had once been the leader of the federal government's neutral faction, and it had to reclaim that position. Only then would it be able to exert its influence to alter the current situation. In the past, Shrek Academy rarely made any statements in the federal parliament, but now, it was time for Shrek Academy to make its voice heard. The banquet lasted deep into the night, and after everyone departed, Tang Wuling returned to his room on the top floor of the main school building. His forging workshop and living quarters were all situated here, and he very rarely left this place. The slight effects from the alcohol he had ingested during the banquet had already faded. With his current physical condition, his powerful blood essence would be able to easily wipe away the effects of alcohol, even if he didn't actively do anything. He quickly entered a state of meditation, and his soul power flowed naturally within his body as faint golden light began to surface on his skin. If one were to look closely, they would discover that there were faint patterns within the golden light, and that there was a layer of rainbow light outside of it. In that instant, it was as if he had already become one with this entire world and become a part of the plane. Not only had he been producing heavenly refined metals through his daily forging, he had also been refining his own body using the elemental tribulations, and he had already reached full mastery of his congenital secret method, as well as combined it as one with his golden dragon king bloodline. This allowed him to attain a powerful body that even limit Douluos couldn't obtain. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to take Kyangu Diding's staff strike head-on. That staff strike from Kyangu Diding had allowed Tang Wuling to experience what extreme explosive power was like. He discovered that even though Kyangu Diding was far inferior to himself when it came to pure strength, he was able to use his own soul power and planar power to destroy planar laws, thereby unleashing extremely fierce and explosive power. The operative word here was explosive. Even without the treatment from the Tree of Life, Tang Wuling would have still been able to recover after some time. After breaking his 14th golden dragon king seal, his regenerative abilities had been elevated once again, and this was also why he could engage in heavenly refinement every day without any inhibitions. The second soul core in his brain was gradually taking shape, and in contrast with the soul core in his dantian, this one was in the shape of a miniature golden dragon. In the beginning, it had been a normal soul core, but as time passed, Tang Wuling was surprised to discover that the soul core had shattered like an egg, and a miniature golden dragon had emerged. Furthermore, it wasn't a stationary entity. Instead, it was constantly roaming around, and he could sense that it had some type of resonance with his final 4 golden dragon king seals. With these 2 soul cores and his dragon core, Tang Wuling had undergone a fundamental transformation. Through the elemental tribulations that he was constantly transcending, he was able to integrate all of his abilities, as well as his 3 cores. During these past few months, Tang Wuling had been working hard to consolidate his newfound powers as a hyper Douluo. Ever since he had become a titled Douluo, he discovered that his cultivation had become easier than before. This was because his body had a high level of harmony with the entire plane, and the natural energies that normal titled Douluos would find very difficult to draw upon during their cultivation would naturally come to him for his absorption. Furthermore, the rate at which this was happening was becoming faster and faster. Was this a good thing? At face value, constant acceleration in one's rate of cultivation was, of course, a fantastic thing. However, following that battle against the demonic plane, Tang Wuling had figured out that acceleration of his rate of cultivation progression would undoubtedly make him more powerful more quickly, but it also posed more of a threat to his remaining golden dragon king seals. It was clear that this rate of progress was very abnormal, and it could well be influenced by the soul of the golden dragon king that was lurking in the 18th seal. That concealed soul of the golden dragon king had attempted to crush his will and control him on more than one occasion. As such, Tang Wuling had chosen to do something very conservative, which was to actively slow down his own rate of progression. Chapter 1642. It had been quite some time since he had become a hyper Douluo, and if he had allowed himself to progress as normal, he would very likely have already reached rank 96 or even 97 in soul power. However, he had restricted himself to rank 95 and didn't allow himself to make easy progress. He was choosing to build a stronger foundation instead. At the same time, he was directing the planar power under his control into the remaining 4 seals to make them more stable. In a sense, planar power was already very similar to godly power. The seals had been constructed from Tang San's godly power, and as such, he was able to stabilize those seals to a certain extent with planar power. All of his soul power that he gained was intentionally compressed by him, then restricted by the ice god's heart that Gyuno had given him so that he could condense it within his dragon core, thereby preventing it from enhancing his cultivation. Aside from stabilizing his golden dragon king seals, there was another benefit to doing this, which was that if there ever came a time when he wanted to elevate his own cultivation rank at all costs, he could give himself a massive boost in a very short time. He didn't know exactly how much this condensed soul power would enhance him, but in his own opinion, he felt that this was the right way to go. The faint rainbow light gradually brightened to illuminate the entire room. These were the purest of elements drawn to him by planar power, and they were baptizing his entire body. The elemental energy gradually became more and more viscous, and soon, it was revolving around him like a substantial object. The next morning, bong, 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 bong. 9 melodious tolls of a bell rang out within Shrek Academy, and the sound was audible around the entire Sea God's Lake. This was the sound for assembly, and in the tradition of Shrek Academy, only when all teachers and students were required to assemble would there be 9 bell chimes, indicating that there was something very important to be announced. On this day, the 9 tolls of the bell signified the imminent commencement of the Academy's opening ceremony. All 117 students of the outer court were quickly brought to the spacious plaza of the Academy by their respective homeroom teachers. Compared to the assembly of all 6-year levels during Shrek Academy's heyday, this wasn't anything remarkable. In fact, the 117 students left the spacious plaza looking rather empty. However, this heralded a new beginning for Shrek Academy, a new journey to glory. Directly in front of the plaza was a wide platform, at the very center of which stood Tang Wuling, the other members of Shrek's 7 monsters, outer court principal Wu Zhangkong, and the other teachers of the outer court. Tang Wuling was very pleased with the fervent looks he could see in the eyes of all of the students. He had actually been the first person to experience the illusion created in the 7 Saint Paradise, and despite how busy he was, he still watched it 5 times. In the illusion, he saw his parents in their youth, and for the first time, he had even burst into tears. In that instant, all of the discontent he had harbored toward the 7 old demons completely vanished. His father was still so ordinary looking at the time, while his mother was as beautiful as ever, and those images had left him with a series of beautiful memories. He wanted to keep reliving that illusion over and over again, but he simply had too many things that he had to do. All of these new students had undoubtedly all experienced those memories as well, and through them, they had witnessed the rise and tradition of Shrek Academy. Regardless of how wealthy the Spirit Pagoda became, it was founded 10,000 years too late, and it didn't have the seniors that Shrek Academy did, who had made significant contributions to the entire continent. The crown jewel of Shrek Academy was the first generation of Shrek's 7 monsters, who had essentially saved the entire entire Soulmaster world. Otherwise, if the Spirit Hall had succeeded in its goal of world domination, no one knew what the continent would be like today. The founders of the Tang sect and the first generation of Shrek 7 monsters were all legendary heroes, and these children in their early teens were easiest to inspire with such legendary tales. All of them were complete blank slates, and it was up to Shrek Academy to inscribe its teachings upon those blank slates. The illusion presented to them by the Seven Saint Paradise was a lesson in ideology and moral character, and it had worked far better than expected. The 117 students had been split up into 4 classes, with 29 each in 3 classes, while the final class had 30 students. The 4 homeroom teachers were people Tang Wuling was very familiar with. They were Luo Dixing, Wu Sijuo, Xu Yucheng, and Yang Nyangsha, aside from Zheng Yuren, who was currently dedicating herself solely to researching toxins. The other 4 had all been instated as homeroom teachers. At this moment, they were standing at the front of their respective classes, looking up at Tang Wuling and everyone else. A reminiscent look appeared in Tang Wuling's eyes at the sight of all of these students. Over a decade ago, he had been in the same position as these children, filled with fervent yearning for the new school term to begin so that he could become a student of Shrek Academy. Now, he was standing on the platform and had become the leader of Shrek Academy. Hello everyone, I'm Wu Zhangkong, the out-of-court principal of Shrek Academy. Wu Zhangkong said, from this day forth, all of you are students of Shrek Academy. Perhaps you've heard that our academy was attacked a few years ago, and even to this day, we still haven't recovered from the grief inflicted upon us by that disaster. However, all of you should be even more aware of Shrek Academy's tradition as the #1 academy on the continent. The rebuilt Shrek Academy is no different from Shrek Academy of the past. We still have very strict requirements. If you can't fulfill those requirements, then you'll be asked to leave. Shrek Academy only nurtures monsters, not ordinary people, and your mission is to make sure that you always remain a monster. Wu Zhangkong's expression was still very cold, just as it had been over 10 years ago. However, Tang Wuling was struck by the urge to laugh as this was the first time he had heard Wu Zhangkong say so much in one go. The cold and forbidding teacher Wu had become the authoritative principal Wu, but the one thing that remains the same was that he was still Tang Wuling's idol. After delivering his address, Wu Zhangkong passed the figurative microphone to Tang Wuling. Next, please welcome the Sea God's Pavilion Master, Dragon Emperor Douluo Tang Wuling, to deliver his address. Wu Zhangkong took a step back, while Tang Wuling stepped forward, and he looked down at the excited children below the stage as he said, "Martial souls are blessings bestowed upon us by the Douluo continent, and there are countless types. Even ordinary people can benefit from martial souls. If your martial soul is a hoe, you'll be a better farmer than others. If your martial soul is an axe, you'll be a better lumberjack than others. However, all of us are especially blessed as we possess both martial souls and soul power, thereby allowing us to become soul masters." Chapter 1643. This is something that we must cherish. We must cherish ourselves and our own powers. There is a type of soul master known as an evil soul master. Are their powers evil? No, it is their hearts that are evil instead. Hence, aside from cultivation education, you'll also be educated morally here at Shrek Academy. Academies aren't just institutions of education, they're also institutions of nurturing. Shrek Academy will do its very best to ensure that all of you become just and righteous soul masters. Over 10 years ago, I came to Shrek Academy with all my dreams and aspirations, just like all of you. Here, I found my second home, and I received the best guidance. However, what taught me the most important lesson was actually that bombing. That disaster destroyed the entire Shrek city and took countless lives. The Tang sect headquarters ceased to exist, and Shrek Academy became a massive crater, which is now the new Sea God's Lake. However, not even a single student of Shrek Academy perished during the explosion. All of the teachers, led by the last Sea God's Pavilion Master, Senior Atlas Douluo, sacrificed themselves to grant all of the students an opportunity to survive. Only several years after the event, when I was reunited with everyone, was I made aware of all this. Only then did I come to understand that all of our teachers had paid the ultimate price for our sake. That was a lesson that I would never forget, and the seniors of Shrek Academy have ingrained the glory of Shrek Academy into everyone's hearts through their sacrifices. They taught me to fight for justice. They taught me what it entailed to be a member of Shrek Academy. All of the teachers present, including myself, will carry on this tradition. We'll use everything we have to protect all of you in the academy until our final dying breaths. Shrek Academy is a soul master academy, but that's definitely not all that it is. The name of Shrek is a glorious title that has been guarded by countless seniors throughout history. The glory of Shrek Academy is unshakable. Tang Wuling paused momentarily here before continuing. Regardless of which direction you decide to go in the future, always remember that you came from Shrek Academy. If you stray away from the path of righteousness someday, then Shrek Academy will take back everything that it gave to you. Similarly, if you're ever bullied or oppressed and are in the right, Shrek Academy will welcome your return with open arms at any time. The academy is your parent. Anyone who dares to oppress the children of the academy will face the academy's wrath. This is another part of Shrek Academy's tradition. The academy will always cover up for its children. Even Wu Zhangkong couldn't help but display a hint of amusement upon hearing Tang Wuling's final sentence. All of a sudden, one of the students yelled, "Long live Shrek Academy!" The cry was contagious, and soon, the entire cohort was chanting the same words with excitement in their eyes. Through his exceptional aptitude, Yu Zichen had successfully become a student of Shrek Academy, and in this moment, he felt as if his blood were boiling in his veins. He was waving his arms with all his might and chanting alongside the rest of the students at the top of his lungs. Long live Shrek Academy! Long live Shrek Academy! He had been selected into the first class, which was Luo Dixing's class. During the selection process, the 4 homeroom teachers had employed a very fair method, which was that each person would choose a student in sequential order based on their examination marks, and the process would be repeated until all of the students had been chosen. Thus, the classes would theoretically be relatively equal in power, and there wouldn't be any particular standout. Luo Dixing, Wu Sijuo, Xu Yucheng, and Yang Nyangsha were all very astute when it came to their selections. Luo Dixing was once the main control system soul master of their group, and the first person he had chosen was Yu Zichen, who had also been assigned the task of class captain. He was very fond of the enormous control system potential and versatility of Yu Zichen's martial soul, and the fact that Yu Zichen was already close to a soul elder only served to improve Luo Dixing's evaluation of him. Even in the history of Shrek Academy, there weren't many students who could reach rank 29 soul power at just 12 years of age. The cultivation rank that a soul master reached before turning 20 years of age was very important. If a soul master couldn't cross the soul elder rank before turning 20, then there was virtually no chance that they would be able to reach the soul sage level in the future. As such, the greater the potential one displayed at a young age, the higher their ceiling would theoretically be. Luo Dixing, Xu Yucheng, Yang Nyangsha, Wu Sijuo, and Zheng Yuren had all been exceptional young prodigies themselves, so they were even more aware of this fact. Thus, Luo Dixing had very high hopes for Yu Zichen. The opening ceremony was very simple. After some ground rules were set, the homeroom teachers took the students back to their classrooms to teach them their first lessons. According to the tradition of Shrek Academy, the first lesson was comprised primarily of an introduction of Shrek Academy, as well as some things that students had to take note of during their studies and cultivation. With this first cohort of new students, the academy had taken its first step on the path to resurgence, and everything became peaceful again. The Spirit Pagoda was also keeping a very low profile, and at the very least, they didn't appear to be playing against Shrek Academy in any way. The Tang sect had already issued an application to the federal government to be vindicated as a treasonous organization. This application had been issued 3 days after Shrek Academy's enrollment day. Everyone was well aware of the relationship between the Tang sect and Shrek Academy. After all, the Tang sect master and Sea God's Pavilion master were the same person, and the two super organizations had a total of 7 limit Douluo between them, so the government had to take this application seriously. The Tang sect had already been oppressed for far too long. Now that Shrek Academy was on the path to resurgence, it was time for the Tang sect to emerge from exile as well. On the topic of the Tang sect's vindication, a fierce debate erupted within the federal parliament. The Dou faction was naturally in full approval, and even the majority of the neutral faction had chosen to take their side. If it weren't for the fact that the Eagle faction had grown dramatically during this recent period of time, it would have already been overwhelmed. However, something completely unexpected to the Tang sect and Shrek Academy was about to happen. Tang Wuling emerged from his forging workshop and performed some stretches. The feeling of numbness from being struck by elemental lightning was truly far from enjoyable, and what was quite exasperating to him was that as his physical tolerance had improved, the elemental tribulations befalling him had also become more fearsome. He reflexively picked up his soul communicator to find that there were a few missed calls, one of which came as quite a surprise to him. Due to just how fearsome the elemental tribulations were, Tang Wuling didn't even wear clothes during his heavenly refinement now in order to prevent unnecessary waste, so he naturally wasn't going to carry his soul communicator with him. He dialed the number and patiently waited for the call to be connected. Moments later, the call was picked up, and a captivating voice rang out from the other end. Wuling, chapter 1644. It's me, big sister. I can see that I have quite a few missed calls from you. What happened? The person Tang Wuling was currently speaking to was none other than Mo Lan, who had already become the leader of the Dou faction. Due to her past experiences and the political background of her late father, she had received the Dou faction's full support and was deeply loved by all Dou faction supporters. Mo Lan replied in a grim voice, I have something very important that I need to speak to you about. Tang Wuling's heart jolted upon hearing this. It had been a very long time since he had heard Mo Lan speaking in such a solemn tone. What's going on? Mo Lan explained. The application issued by your Tang sect has sparked a huge debate in Parliament. Of course, our Dou faction was in full support. The Tang sect has done so much for the continent and the Federation, so it still has many supporters, and with the reconstruction of Shrek Academy, even the neutral faction is beginning to sway toward us. This is the good news. However, as you know, the Eagle faction has expanded rapidly in the wake of the Shrek City bombing, and they still hold the vast majority of parliamentary seats. In contrast, our power is still too lackluster. However, due to your recent display of power, even the Eagle faction is very reluctant to stand against the Tang sect and Shrek Academy, so the application should have been approved without a hitch. However, Mo Lan paused here for a moment before a hint of fury crept into her voice as she continued. The Spirit Pagoda is determined to cause trouble. They suggest that the Tang sect should prove itself before it should be vindicated. Their proposal is to start a second war against the Douluo Empire and Dou Spirit Empire, and the Tang sect must participate and provide its support to prove that it's not a treasonous organization. This proposal has received the support of virtually the entire Eagle faction, and it's placed us in a very passive position. They want to start a second war? Tang Wuling exclaimed. Mo Lan replied, that's right. Of course, we vehemently oppose this proposal, but to minimal effect. Currently, the Federation does indeed have a massive resource shortage, especially when it comes to research resources. Hence, even in the neutral faction, there are many supporters of a second war. The theory behind the Eagle faction's proposal is that the Douluo Empire and Dou Spirit Empire aren't advanced enough to make full use of their resources, and that their resources will only be fully capitalized on in the Federation's hands. On top of that, they state that long-term peace can only be achieved when all three continents are united under the Federation's banner. Tang Wuling's brows furrowed tightly upon hearing this. Never did he think that the Federation would be considering a second war this soon. The Spirit Pagoda is the mastermind in the shadows, right? Tang Wuling asked. Mo Lan chuckled coldly in response. They are indeed the masterminds, but not in the shadows this time. They've already declared that they're going to provide half of the expenses required to instigate this war. What? Tang Wuling was astonished to hear this. One had to realize that the expenses required to start a war definitely amounted to an astronomical sum. By offering to provide half of the expenses, the Spirit Pagoda was essentially bribing the entire military. Mo Lan continued. The Spirit Pagoda's goal is actually very simple. With the power that you've displayed, if the Tang sect were to be vindicated, the power balance on the continent would quickly return to what it had been before the Shrek City bombing. When that time comes, their power will be significantly diminished, and they may even have to relinquish control over the Eagle faction. Hence, they're proposing to start this war to plunder resources from the other two continents, as well as to drag the Tang sect down with them. If the war is won, then the Spirit Pagoda will naturally be held in even higher regard. The Spirit Pagoda is already being heavily oppressed in the Dou Spirit Empire, and the situation isn't as bad in the Douluo Empire, but the Spirit Pagoda is still facing immense pressure there. In contrast, the Tang sect is like a fish in water in those two empires. If the war really can result in the destruction of those two empires, then the Spirit Pagoda would undoubtedly be the greatest beneficiary. In comparison, covering half of the war expenses would be entirely worth it. At the same time, the Spirit Pagoda can also increase its influence through this war. Tang Wuling sighed, so they're still unwilling to give up. Do you have any suggestions, big sister? Mo Lan replied with a wry smile. I'm afraid not, but if the war were to go ahead, then not only would our influence be further diminished, the other two continents would be reduced to hell on earth. The parliamentary members of the Spirit Pagoda even proposed that the final Godslayer missile should be brought out to intimidate the two empires into surrender. They're going to bring out the final Godslayer missile. Tang Wuling's voice immediately spiked up a few octaves. To this very day, the doomsday-like scene from the Godslayer missile explosions still remained fresh in his mind. Even hearing the name made his skin crawl. Humans simply couldn't contend with the power of those things. Mo Lan said, that's the situation. Our Dou faction will do its best to prevent, or at least delay this war. But you have to help us as well. We have to work together to foil this plan somehow. I understand. Thank you for your timely notification, big sister. After ending the call, Tang Wuling took a shower to refresh himself and calm his own tumultuous emotions, then changed into a set of new clothes before immediately paying Long Yeyu and Yao a visit. This was a very important matter, and the fact that the Federation was trying to recruit the Tang sect behind this cause was very troublesome. This was something that they had to discuss with the two limit Douluos of the Tang sect. With the failure from last time, the Federation most likely wouldn't retreat so easily if another war were to be instigated. Shrek Academy was currently only just getting back onto the right track, and all of its powerful beings had to stay to ward off other powers that were potentially plotting against the Academy, such as the Spirit Pagoda. They were naturally also aware that the new Shrek Academy was still in a very early stage of its development, and if it were to send powerful beings to prevent this war, then the Spirit Pagoda would immediately exert pressure upon the Academy. The key was the final Godslayer missile. Two of them had gone missing in the past. Who was to say that the third one wouldn't also go missing once it left its secret warehouse? The worst situation would be if the missile ended up in the hands of the Holy Spirit cult or the Spirit Pagoda. Elder Long, should we organize a Sea Gods Pavilion meeting to discuss this matter? Tang Wuling asked. Long Yeyu shook her head in response. It would be best to keep this a secret as much as possible for now. Instead, let's ask Old Demon Greed for his advice. Tang Wuling's heart stirred slightly upon hearing this. The 7 old demons had far different thought processes from normal people, so there was a very good chance that they would be able to come up with some good ideas. There was a connection point between the 7 Saint Paradise and the Sea Gods Pavilion, just like the entrance to the Myriad Beast Plain, so it didn't take long for Old Demon Greed to arrive. What's going on, little Yue? Old Demon Greed sat down right in front of Long Yeyu following his arrival. The 7 Saint Paradise was already open for business, and it was still nurturing the former inner court disciples of Shrek Academy. Due to how close the 7 Saint Paradise was and the fact that it was an independent small plane, the 7 old demons were able to train more disciples at a time, thereby inflicting trauma at a far faster rate than before. Long Yeyu's expression immediately darkened slightly upon hearing the pet name Little Yue, and she scoffed. Can't you be a bit more normal? Old Demon Greed chuckled. How can I be normal when I don't even have a body? Besides, our Shrek Academy trains only monsters. Who needs normal people? Hurry up and tell me what's going on. I was just having the time of my life before you called me here. Tang Wuling's heart spasmed upon hearing this, and he internally observed a moment of silence for the inner court disciples that were currently providing the 7 old demons with their source of entertainment. Ever since the 7 old demons had returned, they had become a lot more excited and enthusiastic than they had been on the demonic island, much to the detriment of their victims, whom the old demons had prepared a vast array of new torture methods for. This is the situation, Senior Greed. Thus, Tang Wuling gave him a recount of what Mo Lan had said. Chapter 1645. They're going to use the Godslayer missile. A grim look appeared on Old Demon Greed's face upon hearing this. 2 Godslayer missiles had laid waste to the Tang sect and Shrek Academy, as well as the entirety of Shrek City, killing countless people in the process. Tang Wuling had made a call to the Tang sect's research department to inquire about this final Godslayer missile, and he had been informed that this Godslayer missile was the most formidable of the 3. Its name was Eternal Heaven, and according to the estimates provided by the Tang sect researchers, this Godslayer missile was at least as powerful as the other 2 Godslayer missiles combined, and it was the Federation's most fearsome secret weapon. Anything within the explosion scope of Eternal Heaven would be razed to the ground. Even gods may not be able to survive its explosion. This was the crown jewel of human technology thus far, and it was also the extreme embodiment of destructive power. Even once the Tang sect supersolar race system was complete, there was no way that it would be able to withstand Eternal Heaven's explosion. It would only be able to buy everyone a sliver of time. Thankfully, only one soul missile of its kind remained on the entire continent, and the remaining resources didn't allow for any more to be created. Even so, a single missile was a devastating threat that could fall at any moment. Old Demon Greed suddenly raised an eyebrow before slamming a hand onto the table, giving Tang Wuling quite a fright. What are you doing? Long Ye complained. There seemed to be flames burning within old demon breed's eyes as he gulped in an excited manner, and said, steal it. Get that thing into our hands. That missile is the main threat, right? Everything will be fine once we get our hands on it. Even if we just keep it as an ornament, it would be better than leaving the missile to those bastards. Tang Wuling faltered slightly upon hearing this. As expected of old demon breed, he was always able to think outside the box. Indeed, if they could get their hands on eternal heaven, then all of their problems would be automatically resolved. Without the Godslayer missile, neither the Eagle faction nor the Spirit Pagoda will be able to threaten Shrek Academy. And with 5-limit Douluo in the academy, they may not even have to fear an attack from the entire Holy Spirit cult. They couldn't just blatantly attack the Spirit Pagoda, but even so, 5-limit Douluo could do many things. At the same time, without the Godslayer missile, the amount of pressure that the Federal Army would be able to exert upon the other two empires would be greatly diminished. If they could get their hands onto the missile, they wouldn't even have to hide it as it would have an immense intimidatory effect. The people that were responsible for the destruction of Shrek Academy would have to consider whether Shrek Academy would drop a Godslayer missile onto their heads as well. With that thing in their grasp, even the Federal Parliament would have to hold Shrek Academy and the Tang sect in far higher regard. At that point, the Federation would be completely unable to start a war or threaten the Tang sect. The Federation was indeed suffering from resource shortages, but plundering resources wasn't the only solution. The Tang sect had constantly been securing resources from the other two empires through trade. Most of the time, war wasn't the answer. Sure, it was the most direct and fastest solution with potentially the greatest rewards, but trade was just as viable over the long term without all of the devastating consequences of war. So why couldn't this be resolved peacefully? The Dou faction had always been promoting trade between the three continents. Once the Eagle faction's influence began to wane, this proposal would be back on the agenda. Thus, Tang Wuling quickly weighed up the situation, then turned to Elder Long and said, I think this is a good idea. What do you think, Elder Long? Long Ye's brows were tightly furrowed as she replied, securing the Godslayer missile would naturally be able to solve all of our problems, but the Federation has always kept eternal heaven under maximum security, and it would be protected by all of the most powerful beings of the Battle God Hall. Perhaps even the Spirit Pagoda would send people to bolster those forces. In addition to that, there's also some cutting-edge technology from the Federation being used, so it's next to impossible to access it. On top of that, we can't make this operation too blatant. Following our clash against the Spirit Pagoda, all 5 of our limit Douluo are definitely under secret satellite surveillance from the Federation. As soon as any of us leaves the academy, we run the risk of being discovered. We can't employ the services of the two Tang sect limit Douluo, either. If we're going to do this, then we have to leave the Tang sect entirely out of this. Indeed, Long Ye was right. This sounded like a simple matter, but was actually extremely difficult in execution. Firstly, they had to find out where the Godslayer missile was, and after that, they still had to contend with all of the measures that had been employed to guard the missile. Taking the missile was certainly the most straightforward solution, but it seemed to be a virtually impossible task. Senior Greed, do you have any ideas? Old Demon Greed rolled his eyes in response. My training was wasted on you. Wuling has been the most outstanding trainee of ours for many years. He excelled in all aspects like no one has for a very long time. Now, think about what we teach. It's infiltration, sabotage, assassination, and other all-round skills. So just let him go and give it a try. Long Ye's heart stirred upon hearing this, and she cast her gaze toward Tang Wuling. It suddenly occurred to her that this would be a dangerous task for anyone else, but Tang Wuling could return to Shrek Academy at any time through his connection with the Tree of Life. With this advantage, there was no need to be concerned about his safety, as he could always return even if he couldn't succeed. Tang Wuling nodded without any hesitation. Our Shrek 7 monsters will all go, and we'll take someone from the Tang sect familiar with this type of destructive weapon. From now on, we need to gather all of the relevant data that we possibly can in preparation for this operation. Long Ye replied, I agree. What do you think, Yali? Yali hesitated momentarily before asking, isn't it too dangerous? Tang Wuling reassured, don't worry, mother, I'll at least be able to return safely, and as long as I get to see the Godslayer missile, I should be able to bring it back. What we need right now is information. I'll pay the 2 limit Douluos of the Tang sect to visit right away to discuss this matter with them as well, not only to get their opinion on the matter, but also to use their power and resources to track down eternal heaven. Long Ye concluded, then it's decided. Make sure to be careful. Upon returning to his room, Tang Wuling was still feeling very excited. Instead of being in a rush to set off, he organized his own thoughts first. Stealing eternal heaven definitely wasn't going to be an easy task. They could think of such a solution, so the military had definitely considered it as well. Both the military and the Spirit Pagoda would be guarding against a potential heist. After all, the other 2 Godslayer missiles had gone missing under extremely suspicious circumstances, so this final and most powerful missile was definitely going to be guarded to an unprecedented extent. Chapter 1646. There was virtually no chance of stealing the missile directly from the warehouse. Limit Douluos were still the most powerful beings in this world, but with the advancement of technology, there were already many weapons that could target Limit Douluo, such as the heavy iron laser of the Blood God Legion. That weapon directly targeted one's internal structure, and unless it was someone like Tang Wuling, who had cultivated even his internal organs, one could easily be severely injured, as evidenced by that great beast called Dreadclaw Bear. Seeing as they couldn't directly infiltrate the warehouse, then there was only one other possibility. The Federation was going to use eternal heaven to intimidate the other 2 empires, so prior to the commencement of the Second War, it was definitely going to be transported to the United Fleet, and that could well be the only opportunity to strike. The most important thing now was information. He required information about who and what regarding the missile, when it was going to be transported, and what route it was going to take during its transportation. At the very least, they needed a rough range of time and area so they could focus their power. With that in mind, he immediately set off to Heaven Dou City, where the 2 Tang sect limit Doulas were. Tang Wuling was in disguise and set off on his own. With his immense powers, it only took him around an hour to reach Heaven Dou City. You want to steal eternal heaven? That's not going to be an easy task, Cao Dou said with his brows tightly furrowed in a contemplative manner. He was once one of the highest-ranking military officials, so he was well aware of the military's power. That's a very good idea, Wuling. If we can obtain eternal heaven, then all of our issues will be resolved. I didn't think that they would stoop as low as to try and force us to participate in this war. Considering how important eternal heaven is, there will be at least an accompanying legion during its transportation. Do you know what that entails? Cao Dou asked. Tang Wuling's heart stirred slightly upon hearing this. It entails that all of the powers in the military will be protecting it. That's right, Cao Dou nodded, and said, on top of that, this legion wouldn't just include firepower. There will be a whole host of assisting personnel as well. The legion protecting eternal heaven is definitely going to be the most elite and most technologically advanced one, so they'll all be armed to the teeth and have all types of surveillance equipment, including the ability to draw upon satellite surveillance. Any infiltration attempt will be detected, which means that you'll face the firepower of an entire federal legion even before you get close to eternal heaven. Tang Wuling was naturally aware of what this surveillance entailed. There were going to be all types of surveillance devices in use, and regardless of how exceptional his disguise abilities were, it definitely wouldn't be an easy task to infiltrate the legion. Zhang Xin continued, as such, it's going to be extremely difficult to steal eternal heaven. There's no way to determine just how difficult it's going to be. All I can say is that your chances of success will be very low. Tang Wuling nodded in response. I understand that, but I still want to give it a try. I'll be the spearhead of this operation as I have a way to get away even if I don't succeed, and I'll ensure that my cover isn't blown, so the risks will be minimal. Cao Dou replied, that is indeed a viable direction. If we can obtain eternal heaven, then the tables will be completely turned. We won't directly use it like they will, but with this major threat up our sleeve, everything will become a lot easier for us. Don't worry about the Tang sect. This is an opportunity for us. We'll agree to participate in this war and donate a sum of money for this cause to lure those people into complacency. In doing so, we'll also be able to obtain more information that I can pass on to you. Tang Wuling said, I also require the assistance of the Tang sect's research and development department. I don't know anywhere near enough about Godslayer missiles, so I'll need someone with the know-how to ensure that the missile can be transported back safely. Do you have any recommendations? Cao Dou replied, that's not an issue. We can't can't make a Godslayer missile, but we've done a lot of research into this area. I'll get the head of research of our Radiant Tang Sect Soul Missile Research Institute to accompany, but do be aware that her personality is quite eccentric, so have patience with her. Tang Wuling replied with a smile. It's all right. All exceptionally skilled individuals are unique in their own ways. There was no way that her personality would be worse than that of the 7 old demons, so Tang Wuling wasn't concerned. All right, go back and make some preparations. I'll get our Tang Sect's intelligence department to gather as much information about Eternal Heaven as they can, and the information will be sent to you in real time. Thus, Tang Wuling returned to Shrek Academy. Shrek Academy was still as peaceful as ever, and even the entire continent was very peaceful. But this was only the calm before another storm. Tang Wuling didn't receive any more information from Molan, so he knew that everything she had said was most likely going to turn into reality. When he attempted to call Molan, her soul communicator was turned off. When making some important decisions, strict confidentiality had to be ensured in the federal parliament, so all parliamentary members involved had to hand in their communication devices. It seemed that the Dou faction was still unable to quell the Eagle faction in the end, and the Eagle faction was going to maintain its absolute advantage in parliament through this war. After all, as long as the people of the Douluo continent continued to support them, the Eagle faction would continue to thrive, and once they brought back bountiful resources from the other two continents, their influence and status would be even further elevated. There were peace advocates among the general public, but most people didn't see an issue with a war that wouldn't take place on the continent. Humans had been striving towards space exploration for many years, and with sufficient resources, this dream would become a reality. The Tang Sect was beginning to gather information on Eternal Heaven, and it was quickly being collated. The storage location of Eternal Heaven was top secret information, so there was no way to find it. Just as Tang Wuling had anticipated, their only opportunity would arise during the missile's transportation. The Tang Sect had already received an invitation from the Federation asking the Tang Sect's master and the 2 Limit Douluo to attend a conference. Tang Wuling naturally couldn't go, but the 2 Limit Douluos were already heading toward Bright City. There were also sources that stated that the North Sea Legion had begun a new round of exercises, and that the Sea God Legion was currently mobilizing toward Bright City. This was extremely precious information to Tang Wuling, as it clearly indicated that the Sea God Legion was very likely responsible for transporting Eternal Heaven. The Sea God Legion was under Chen Xinji's direct jurisdiction, and he had been the commander-in-chief during the last invasion. It seemed that he would be assigned the same role on this occasion as well. Regardless of whether it was in terms of power or influence, Chen Xinji was the leading figure in the military. The most elite legion in the federal military was the Blood God Legion. However, the Blood God Legion had to constantly guard the abyssal passageway, and Cao Dou was once the first Blood God, so he definitely still had a high level of influence over the legion. As such, there was no way that the Federation would entrust the Blood God Legion with the duty of transporting Eternal Heaven. Thus, it seems that the Sea God Legion would be the one most fit for the role. The Sea God Legion was extremely powerful and was equipped with the Federation's most cutting-edge technology. Furthermore, with Chen Xinji at the helm, it would truly be next to impossible to steal Eternal Heaven. As such, despite all of the information that Tang Wuling had received, he still couldn't think of a plan. All he could do now was wait for more information. He was still cultivating and forging as usual every day, but on top of that, he was also rehearsing the skills taught to him by the 7 old demons with the rest of Shrek's 7 monsters. Chapter 1647. Pavilion Master, someone from the Tang Sect has come to see you. A clean-shaven young man reported in a respectful manner. As the Sea God's Pavilion Master, he now had an assistant to take care of miscellaneous matters for him. This assistant, Li Ning, had been chosen from the past inner court disciples, and he wasn't all that powerful, but he was very smart and had great attention to detail. All right, invite them to the guest hall. I'll be there right away. Pavilion Master, the visitor is a woman, and she doesn't seem easy to get along with. Li Ning cautioned. Tang Wuling's heart stirred slightly upon hearing this. Could it be that this was the head of research with the eccentric personality that Cao Dou had been talking about? Let's go. Thus, Tang Wuling was led to the guest hall by Li Ning, where he was greeted by the sight of a woman looking out the window with her hands clasped behind her back. Her attire was very simple, comprised of a black pencil skirt, a professional black blazer, and a plain white blouse. Her long black hair was arranged into a bun with a wooden hairpin stuck through it, but what was far from ordinary was her figure. Her waist was very slender, but her backside was almost comically round, almost rotund. In conjunction with her long legs, she was the very definition of the word thick. Furthermore, due to how exaggerated the curves of her backside were, it was often the first place that one's gaze naturally drifted toward. The woman seemed to have heard the approaching footsteps, and she immediately turned around. Don't look at my butt. Her appearance was certainly nowhere near Yuna's level, but her eyes were very large, and she had healthy-looking tan skin. There were slight freckles on her face, and she was giving off an unruly disposition. However, she was wearing a set of black square frame glasses, creating the image of a professional that completely contrasted with her unruly energy. Tang Wuling was left feeling rather awkward as he did indeed reflexively look at her butt. Unless one was blind or mentally prepared, it would be very difficult to avoid reflexively looking at that region. Hi there, my name is Tang Wuling. You're the new sect master. The woman strode over to him and sized him up without any inhibitions. She appeared to only be around 25 to 26 years of age, but her aura and the look in her eyes indicated that she was older than her appearance suggested. Tang Wuling could clearly sense that her blood essence was very abundant, far more so than the average person, but strangely enough, she wasn't giving off any soul power fluctuations at all. Tang Wuling's spiritual power was at the mental manifestation level, so it was virtually impossible for one to hide their soul power in his presence, which meant that there was a very good chance that this woman was just an ordinary person. May I ask your name? Tang Wuling asked in a calm manner. The woman replied, my name is Ling Zichen, and I come from the Tang Sect Soul Missile Research Center. You can call me Head Researcher Ling. Tang Wuling wasn't surprised to hear this answer, and he offered his hand to Ling Zichen. Welcome to Shrek Academy, Head Researcher Ling. However, Ling Zichen had no intention of shaking his hand. Instead, she stared intently into Tang Wuling's eyes, and said, I'm very displeased by the fact that I was sent here without any explanation. You may be the Tang Sect master, but do you know how important my research is? Pausing my research is the same as pausing my train of thought and ideas. Who knows how long it'll take me to get back on the right track again? Our research involves 110 scientists, and it's been ongoing for 3 years. As the head researcher, my departure will severely impact the progress of our research, so you owe me an explanation. In the face of this feisty character, Tang Wuling could only offer a fawning smile. Setting everything aside, her status as head researcher indicated that at the very least, she was the leading scientist in the Tang Sect when it came to soul missile research. Even the 2 Limit Douluos would most likely have to be very tolerant toward her, let alone him. My sincerest apologies, Head Researcher Ling. I was unaware that you were conducting research. I only invited you here as I have something very important that I require your assistance with. Ling Zichen pursed her lips in response. I can't figure out for the life of me why you were made the new sect master. You don't even have a temper. Why do you feel the need to be so good-looking as a man? What are you, some type of sissy? Tang Wuling's expression immediately darkened slightly upon hearing this. Why was this woman suddenly turning to personal attacks? All right, hurry up and spit it out. I still have things I need to do after I finish up here. I'll give you half a day. No, 3 hours. I don't think there are any issues you can pose that I can't resolve within 3 hours. Ling Zichen was speaking at an extremely fast clip, like a verbal machine gun. Tang Wuling replied, I'm afraid that this really isn't something you can resolve within 3 hours. In order to ensure confidentiality, we couldn't tell you why we invited you here in advance. I can reveal to you now that we're going to be undertaking a secret operation that requires your assistance. Tang Wuling raised a hand as he spoke, and a warped barrier of light instantly enveloped both of them. Within a spiritual barrier of this caliber, even Limit Douluos and the most advanced technology wouldn't be able to eavesdrop on their conversation. Go on then. Ling Zichen displayed no interest in the warped light barrier. It was clearly not the first time she had seen it. Tang Wuling said, we're going to steal Eternal Heaven. As the leading soul missile researcher, before he had a chance to finish, Ling Zichen suddenly rushed toward him, then grabbed onto the front of his shirt before tugging him toward her. Of course, there was no way that she would be able to move Tang Wuling with her strength, so instead of achieving the desired effect, a massive gash was torn into Tang Wuling's clothes, revealing his solid pectoral muscles. However, Ling Zichen had no interest in admiring his physique. Instead, her eyes were wide with excitement as she said, what did you say? Say that again. Tang Wuling was given quite a fright by her, and he almost reflexively slapped her away. Thankfully, he was able to catch himself before he did that. Otherwise, this head researcher Ling would have most likely already ceased to exist by now. I said we're going to steal Eternal Heaven. Looks like you already know about it, Tang Wuling said. Of course I do. Ling Zichen was practically yelling with excitement. I'm so glad someone is finally willing to do this. I would have stolen that thing a long time ago if I could. You found the right person. No one is more familiar with eternal heaven than I am. As I was saying, I don't think this is something that can be resolved within 3 hours. So, Ling Zichen replied without any hesitation. I'm not going anywhere even if you try to chase me away now. She then poked a finger onto Tang Wulin's chest and said, you're looking more like a man to me now. Chapter 1648. Tang Wulin took a step back just as she was about to poke his chest a second time, and he said, let's stick to the topic. Ling Zichen pursed her lips in a disdainful manner. What are you so scared of? Are you really a man? If you can steal eternal heaven for me, I'll even let you sleep with me. Let's stick to the topic. Tang Wulin repeated as his voice spiked up a few octaves. If it weren't for the fact that Ling Zichen was only an ordinary person, he really wanted to release his aura to intimidate this arrogant woman. Fine. Let me tell you this, my ancestors participated in the research and development of eternal heaven. It was the last Godslayer missile to have ever been created, and many of the key technical components involved have already been lost to time, so even I only know a little bit about it. Do you know why such a small missile could possess so much destructive power? That's because all uncommon metals contain some special substances, which we refer to as source. Source is the reason why uncommon metals are hard, and in essence, the process of forging is one that refines source. Only at the soul refinement level or above can source be fundamentally changed. Godslayer missiles were proposed as a renowned scientist at the time had invented a way to extract the source of metals. Through this method, he was able to extract the core energy of uncommon metals before purifying and compressing this energy. Source has very little mass. No more than 1 gram can be extracted from a cubic meter block of heavy silver. With sufficient source placed in the right sequences, the sources will undergo reactions with one another in a process known as source fusion, which can create extremely fierce and destructive power. A Godslayer missile will contain a total of more than 50 kilograms of source, and once activated, the source fusion will produce extremely devastating power. This was the first time Tang Wulin was hearing information about Godslayer missiles, so he was very curious. And now that Ling Zichen was talking about her area of expertise, she was also appearing a bit more normal. Can you imagine the sheer quantity of uncommon metals required to create a single Godslayer missile? This is why only 3 have been created in history, and we're still suffering as a result in the form of resource shortages to this very day. Once the Federation discovered that the creation of Godslayer missiles was simply unsustainable, it was already too late, and the resources required to create 3 Godslayer missiles had already been irreversibly altered. As a result, the Federation banned all research into the sources of uncommon metals. But in my opinion, that's downright idiocy. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with researching source, and if done correctly, it can hugely benefit technological advancements. For example, I'm currently researching how to use source to create a positive circulation array, thereby allowing for constant generation of enormous amounts of energy through recycling of source. To put it in simpler terms, my vision is to use a Godslayer missile that can constantly recycle itself as an energy source to support technological facilities that require high energy expenditure, such as warships and spaceships. The primary reason behind our slow progress in space exploration is a lack of a suitable energy source, which prevents us from venturing too far into outer space. If my research succeeds, we'll be able to resolve this issue to a massive extent. Let's not stray too far away from the topic at hand. Head researcher Lin. Even though Tang Wulin was also very interested in this technology, the most important thing now was to devise a plan to secure the Godslayer missile. Ling Zichen glared at him before continuing. So if we can get eternal heaven and disassemble it to secure the source within it, then divide the source categorically. Imagine how massive an energy resource that would be. The source contained within one eternal heaven is enough for me to create 100 positive circulation solar rays. Tang Wulin's heart immediately spasmed upon hearing this. Disassemble eternal heaven? Wouldn't that be dangerous? Ling Zichen replied, of course it'll be, but risk and reward come hand in hand. I'm at least 60% confident that I'll be able to successfully disassemble it. Then what about the other 40%? Tang Wulin asked. It'll explode. Ling Zichen replied in a nonchalant manner. Tang Wulin finally understood what was going on here. This woman was insane. Why did the two-limit Douluo send a crazy woman to help him? Tang Wulin's expression darkened as he said in a serious manner. Absolutely not. Even if we manage to secure eternal heaven, I won't allow its disassembly even if there's only a 1% chance that it'll be detonated. Shrek City has already been bombed once. Neither the Tang sect nor Shrek Academy can afford to suffer a repeat of that disaster. Ling Zichen countered. I can take it to a deserted area for disassembly. Tang Wulin finally couldn't repress his temper any longer. And risk your own life? I don't think so. This is a non-negotiable order. Ling Zichen pursed her lips in response. We'll see once we actually secure the missile. Tang Wulin's patience was quickly running out, and he took a deep breath to calm himself down before asking, do you have any advice from a technical perspective? Ling Zichen shrugged in response. Not really. Just find it and bring it back. Tang Wulin faltered slightly upon hearing this. It's that simple. Under what circumstances will eternal heaven explode? Ling Zichen replied, that depends on how the federal government programmed it. Of course, regardless of what programming they've used, I'll be able to disable it as long as we can get to the missile. But I can assure you of. There was an immense sense of confidence in her words as she spoke. Tang Wulin said, the problem is that eternal heaven is definitely in a very heavily guarded place, and it'll be very difficult for me to bring an ordinary person like you along with me. We'll most likely be facing more than one 4-word battle armor master, so I can't ensure your safety. You don't need to worry about my safety. I may not be a soul master, but you may not be a match for me in a one-on-one battle. Ling Zichen said as she raised her chin slightly in a provocative manner. Oh. Tang Wulin was rather taken aback to hear this. Ling Zichen raised her right hand, and only then did Tang Wulin notice that there was a beautiful ornament on the back of her hand. This was a thin metal plate that was strapped to the back of her hand, with a round pink gem that had a diameter of around an inch at the center. Pink light surged forth, forming pink bands of light that completely enveloped Ling Zichen's entire body. In the span of just a couple of breaths, she was encapsulated within a suit of pink armor. The suit of armor only increased her height by about 25%, which was similar to the height enhancement made by a suit of battle armor. The suit of pink armor appeared to be very light and agile, and it was entirely constructed from rhomboid pieces of different sizes, at the center of each of which was a tiny speck of light that was around the size of a sesame seed. These specks of light were almost invisible unless one were to look carefully at them, but they basked the entire suit of armor in a layer of pink light. I bet you haven't seen anything like this before. This is my latest successful project, in which a source positive circulation core has been infused into a mecha. This mecha incorporates the most advanced modern mecha technology, as well as the soul circuits of battle armor, which is activated by source as its energy core. It's not like you'll understand this anyway. The simplest explanation is that even though this mecha is only the size of a suit of battle armor, it is a genuine suit of divine grade mecha, and even more importantly, it can be used by even ordinary people as it has a special defense system that minimizes the strain on the pilot during usage. Tang Wulin couldn't help but draw a sharp breath upon hearing this. Chapter 1649. He wasn't stunned by the fact that this was such a light and compact divine grade mecha, nor by the utilization of source as the energy core. Instead, he was astonished to hear that even ordinary people could use this divine grade mecha. This meant that if this product could be mass produced in the future, then any ordinary person could become a divine grade mecha pilot after undergoing proper training. This was downright incredible to think about. If this area of research were to succeed, then the status of soul masters would diminish even further. Are you scared? Ling Zichen made a provocative gesture toward Tang Wulin. Tang Wulin asked, can this type of mecha be mass-produced? Ling Zichen replied without any hesitation, no way. Do you know how much it costs to construct this mecha? Among all of the resources we secured from the other 2 empires through trade, around 60% of it was used up by our department. Currently, I've successfully developed a small source positive circulation array, and all of the resources were only enough to create this one mecha. This thing is a prototype to display the results of our research, but it's very impractical and unsustainable to produce as it incurs over 10 times the cost required to construct a normal divine grade mecha. I can't think of any way to mass-produce it right now, but I dare say that even in 1,000 years, this will still be an advanced piece of technology. Tang Wulin heaved an internal sigh of relief upon hearing this. At the very least, soul masters wouldn't be completely replaced by this technology in a short time. However, if we can develop multiple combinations of source positive circulation systems to harness the effect of of source fusion, then it'll be hard to say what we'd be able to do. Of course, this will require a lengthy process, perhaps even several generations of work. Just like what you were concerned about earlier, this type of research is extremely dangerous, and if anything goes wrong, then researchers could easily perish. Ling Zichen's voice suddenly became a little forlorn as she spoke. Do you have friends who? Ling Zichen replied, my parents were killed in the explosion caused by the first generation positive circulation array going out of control. My apologies. Tang Wuolin heaved an internal sigh, and his impression of Ling Zichen improved slightly. It's all right. We've already dedicated our lives to our research. It's our ultimate goal in life. If I can get the opportunity to disassemble eternal heaven, then I'd gladly give my own life in exchange. Tang Wuolin really wanted to slam his head against the wall. How had they returned to this topic again? The thought processes of scientists really couldn't be fathomed by normal people. I need to test your combat prowess, Tang Wuolin said. Sure. I also want to see if you're worthy of your status as the Tang sect master. Ling Zichen replied in an excited voice. Tang Wuolin was suddenly struck by the feeling that this woman was not just a mad scientist. It was very likely that she was also a big fan of violence. Shrek Academy's drill ground was definitely the most advanced on the entire continent. The Tang sect had designed this massive drill ground, which was situated on one side of Shrek Academy's plaza. In a sense, it was basically a sports stadium. This sports stadium was around half the size of the Bright City Sports Stadium, and it possessed all types of advanced facilities that could be adjusted at any time to suit different needs. As such, it could be used for mega battles, soul master battles, cultivation, practical combat drills, etc. This was the most important part of the rebuilt Shrek Academy. Among the 4 classes that had just been accepted into the academy, there was one class that would be taught all types of different lessons in this venue. On this day, it was the turn of Luo Gixing's first class to use the drill ground. Yi Zichen had already been elected as class captain, and he was leading from the very front. The sports stadium before them was extremely spacious, and there was a crystalline protective barrier that resembled glass all around the venue. Back in the day, Luo Gixing had been quite renowned in the cohort with his spatial abilities, and he was rated as the best control system soul master in the cohort. At the very least, that was the case before the rise of Xu Xiaoan. Tang Wuolin and the others had enrolled late, and when they had first entered the academy, they had been oppressed quite a bit. However, who could have imagined that over 10 years later, all of them would become pillars of Shrek Academy? Back then, he had been a vigorous youth determined to uphold the glory of Shrek Academy, yet now, he was already a teacher of the academy. Everything had changed far too quickly. Yi Zichen was standing at the front of the line with a confident expression. He didn't hail from a noble upbringing, nor did he have any powerful inheritance, but he possessed a very resilient personality and brilliant aptitude, which had allowed him to reach his current level at such a young age. He couldn't compare with Luo Gixing's cohort, but he was certainly one of the leading students of this cohort. Most importantly, Luo Gixing could see some qualities in Yi Zichen that reminded him of a young Tang Wuolin. Perhaps he could become another Tang Wuolin in a decade or so. This is the Shrek Academy drill ground, sports stadium, or training ground. You'll be coming here on a regular basis for a very long time to come. Internal strife is strictly prohibited in the academy, but sparring is encouraged. What's the difference? It's simple. If you want to fight someone, tell a teacher, and we'll bring you here and act as referee for your battle. That's a sparring match. However, if you break the rules and fight in private, you'll be immediately expelled with no second chances given. Understood? Understood. The entire class yelled without any hesitation. Luo Gixing nodded with a pleased expression. All right, seeing as this is your first time here, I need to get a better understanding of all of you. So the lesson for today is very simple. You'll be engaging in sparring matches. Now then, split up into groups according to what system soul master you are. The first group will be assault system. The second group will be control system. The third group will be agility attack system. The fourth group will be battle soul masters of other systems. And the fifth group will be assistance system. The students quickly arranged themselves into the 5 groups. Yi Zichen hesitated momentarily before deciding to stand in the control system group. His martial soul could be categorized both in the assault system and the control system, but he preferred the control system as he liked the feeling of being able to control the entire battlefield. Luo Gixing picked up the roll in his hand and announced, Yi Zichen, Chen Yuan, Zuangu, Luo Rui, and Shangan Ran will make up the first group. The second group will. Just as Luo Gixing was splitting everyone into groups, a layer of faint red light suddenly appeared in the sports stadium. Initially, the red light had appeared on the crystalline structure around the sports stadium, and it quickly spread to form a massive red light barrier. All of a sudden, an electronic voice rang out. Warning! Warning! A sparring match of the 3-word battle armor master level is about to take place. Please vacate the central area right away and evacuate into the safe zone. Luo Gixing's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and he immediately waved a hand as he said, Everyone, come with me. We might be treated to a good show today. Chapter 1650. A layer of silver light proliferated from his body as he spoke, and the silver light quickly encompassed all of the students in the first class, following which they were all teleported to the edge of the sports stadium over 100 meters away. Right at this moment, 2 figures descended from the sky. Even without looking, Tang Wuolin could sense that Luo Gixing and his class were nearby. He communicated a message to Luo Gixing through voice transmission, and a hint of elation surfaced in the latter's eyes as he immediately nodded in response. I understand. All right, all of you are in for a treat. Come with me. Luo Gixing quickly took his students to a room with a massive glass wall on the second floor of the sports stadium. Faint red light was surging outside the glass wall. This was the most powerful defensive measure in the venue. Even without requiring any instructions from Luo Gixing, all of the students had already rushed over to the glass wall to look out at the 2 people at the center of the drill ground. Teacher Luo, is there about to be a sparring match between 3-word battle armor masters? Yi Zichen asked with an excited expression. Luo Gixing nodded in response. Take a look for yourself. You should be able to recognize one of them. Yi Zichen did as he was told, and his eyes immediately widened as he caught sight of his young idol, who had appeared during the opening ceremony. The first time Yi Zichen had seen him was in the broadcast of the Trial of 5 Gods. He could never forget how one man was able to best an entire empire on his own. Even now, that memory never ceased to inspire him, and it motivated him to endure even the most grueling cultivation. Back when he had intended to apply for Spirit Academy, he had been unaware that this man was the leader of Shrek Academy. When he first saw Tang Wuolin in the flesh during the opening ceremony, he was almost unable to contain himself. A positive idol had an immeasurably beneficial impact on the growth of a young man or woman, just like how Tang Wuolin had been inspired by Wu Zhangkong. Now, he was Yi Zichen's idol. Who was his idol going to battle? Was that a battle armor master as well? It was quite apparent that the pink-armored figure standing across from Tang Wuolin was a woman, and one with an exceptional figure. At that, however, her entire body was encapsulated within that suit of armor, so it was impossible to glean her appearance. Tang Wuolin turned to Ling Zichen and made an inviting hand gesture. Let's begin. I'm very curious to see just how powerful your source-positive circulation core is, even though this tiny divine-grade mecha couldn't be mass-produced. This was the first time he had come into contact with the concept of a source-positive circulation core. If all God-Slayer missiles had been created with this type of core as its foundation, then just how powerful would this mecha be? Source could very well become one of the most important topics of research in human history. At the same time, Tang Wuolin had also begun construction of his own mecha, so if possible, he naturally also wanted to infuse this cutting-edge technology into his own mecha, provided that it was a good fit for him. A faint smile appeared on Ling Zichen's face. Of course, Tang Wuolin was unable to see her expression, but what he did see was a bolt of pink lightning that appeared before him in an instant. With Tang Wuolin's enormous spiritual power, it would naturally cover a very large area around him even without being intentionally released. However, this initial eruption from Ling Zichen had only raised a slight alarm in his spiritual power as she had simply been far too fast. Despite her incredible speed, Tang Wuolin still had the chance to raise a hand to protect himself, but he chose not to do so. Instead, he allowed Ling Zichen's fist to ram heavily into his chest, and in the same instant, he released the full extent of his spiritual power. The bolt of pink lightning suddenly became slower in his eyes, allowing him to assess it properly. As a result, he could see that all of the specks of light over Ling Zichen's entire mecha had instantly lit up, making it seem as if she was suddenly radiating scintillating light. In the next instant, her fist slammed into his chest, and due to the impact, his golden dragon body was automatically released. A series of golden scales appeared all over his chest, and these scales immediately compressed alongside his pectoral muscles to nullify the force of the impact. All of this was clearly sensed by Tang Wuolin, but in the eyes of all of the first-class students, the first clash had unfolded in an instant. Boom! A burst of powerful shockwaves erupted forth as Tang Wulin's body glided backward. At the same time, a layer of reddish golden light appeared around him, rapidly nullifying the force of that terrifying attack as he drifted backward. Only after traveling for over 100 meters was Tang Wulin able to arrest his own backward momentum, and he cast his gaze toward Ling Zichen before giving her a slight nod. Ling Zichen said, that attack was imbued with roughly 1 million tons of power. Generally speaking, even a dusk gold dreadclaw bear would be sent flying by that attack, which means that at the very least, your defensive prowess is comparable to that of a 10,000-year-old dusk gold dreadclaw bear. However, that was only a very small portion of my power. I'm about to step it up now. The bolt of pink lightning appeared once again, covering a distance of over 100 meters in a flash. On this occasion, Tang Wulin decided to lash out in retaliation with his right hand. This mecha possessed considerable offensive prowess, and if Ling Zichen really had been holding back, then this level of combat prowess was indeed befitting of a divine grade mecha. However, it was still yet to be seen whether this mecha had defensive prowess to match. Golden and pink light instantly clashed, and on this occasion, Tang Wulin remained completely unmoved, while the bolt of pink light was sent flying backward. However, it didn't pause in the slightest as it released countless bursts of pink light, which converged toward Tang Wulin like a pink shower of light. Tang Wulin withdrew his right hand and clasped both hands behind his back, then let loose a thunderous dragon's roar, and it could be clearly seen that a massive golden dragon's head had erupted out of his body. Powerful sound waves surged forth as a series of golden halos, instantly devouring the oncoming specks of pink light. The pink mecha re-emerged in midair, and a ball of protective red light with a diameter of around 5 meters emerged around it. The surface of the ball of light rippled violently in the face of the golden dragon roar, but right at this moment, a pair of short spears that were around 1.5 meters in length appeared in the pink mecha's hands, and it was clear that it was those spears that had unleashed those bolts of pink lightning. A spear battle, eh? A faint smile appeared on Tang Wulin's face as he made a grabbing motion with his right hand, and his golden dragon spear appeared in his grasp amid a flash of golden light. Tang Wulin thrust his golden dragon spear forward, and the pink mecha suddenly seemed to have stiffened in midair. In that instant, Ling Zichen was struck by an unprecedented sense of discomfort, not physical discomfort, but discomfort that arose from within her heart. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.